Wait, is this thing on? Can y'all hear me? Okay, here we go.
Woo! Just a dash. Just a dash. Just a dash. Just a dash.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another episode of Just a Dash. I'm gonna be honest with y'all, completely honest with y'all. I was seriously considering delaying this week's episode because technically I'm on vacation. So I am not in my usual setup. The first few weeks of May are always fun for me. I get to celebrate my pop's birthday, which is on Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. And my mama on Mother's Day. And after such an insane year, an insane work season last month, I wanted a chance to be present for both occasions in a more joyful way than I was previously allowed, because 365 days really can make all the difference, y'all. And after a few weeks ago, I am really in a better headspace than I was before. But I mentioned just a few seconds ago that I was on vacation, right? So, and I also said I'm not in my typical setup. So I'm not in New York. I am actually in the outback of the United States, as some folks back in New York like to call it. Yes, if you haven't guessed it yet, I'm in my hometown. I'm in South Florida. And I'm going to keep it all the way real with you. I'm going to keep it a buck. Sometimes I visit my family and I literally only tell one soul about it. I'm really a top-notch secret keeper, and I definitely be keeping things really close to my chest. So I just like to visit sometimes on the DL. So to any Florida peeps who are listening right now and wondering why we didn't hang out, super quick trip. And sometimes your girl just needs to be in her shell. It's a Cancerian thing, I guess. Which, speaking of, let's get into what this episode's going to be about, y'all, because it's a special one that I've got in store for you, and I want to share just a little bit before we jump into Word to the Wise. And I do have a few things on my mind as well this week, so we are going to be getting into Are You For Real? I'm not skipping it this week, but as always, really stoked for y'all to tune into what Say What is about this week. So let's get into it. So if y'all listen to the bonus episode, one of the first questions my squad asked is if astrology would be a part of this show. And naturally, I was like, hell yeah. I know for so many people, their relationship with astrology operates really on a variety of beliefs or extremes. You have really watered down horoscopes on the back of superficial magazines like Cosmopolitan or Vogue, which I'm not judging y'all because I be reading those horoscopes too. I definitely used to be so consumed by it before I really had a grander scope of what astrology entails. Or, you could be the person who signed up for CoStar, which has created a more curated and informed and personalized perspective on various astrological signs and what makes up your chart and how you emotionally respond to things and what your aspirations are. But the T is astrology is an actual science. It's a pseudoscience, and it's really quite fascinating. And to me, it's quite fascinating because when you think about it, there are over 7 billion people on this planet, y'all, all comprised of universal matter. We are made of stardust. And if you don't believe me, you can go listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson because he talks about it. But with that simple piece of information comes this really larger truth, which is all of us are comprised of our own personalities, emotional responses, aspirations, triggers, etc. We manage to coexist. We manage to find soulmates. We manage to find people who have complex personalities that are similar to our own. We manage to find people who we learn very extreme lessons from, sometimes that are painful, sometimes that are illuminating. And I don't know, when you think about it, if you are able to find people who are similar to you and people who you get along with, people who you simply vibe with, all of that is intertwined into some sort of system of connection. And to me, astrology is just one of those sciences which allows us to gain a little more understanding as to how this puzzle all fits together. I truly am one of those people who I really believe there's so much more that we don't understand than that we do. And I'm okay with that, but I'm also curious. It makes me very curious. So To me, astrology is just one of those sciences that continues to fascinate me. So, whether you're already a fan or you have no clue what the fuck I just said and what it all means, you're in luck. Because being on vacation also means I'm at home with the one person who can take us through the basics and intermediate good to knows about the subject. My personal astrological guru and the yin to my yang, my sister, Naika Gabriel, who I've mentioned before on this podcast, but let's just say Sis knows what she's talking about, and it always astounds me just how far her brain goes in retaining all this information. So I'm really excited because we're going to jump into astrology in this episode, and we'll see where the conversation goes. I always have a good time talking to my sister about these things. She is an Aquarius to a T, y'all. She really, and what that means, again, for people who don't know what that means, although I feel like if somebody like says they're not interested in astrology, somehow everybody knows their own sign and they know what the personality traits are and they know what sign is compatible with them. So even people who say they don't care about astrology, some reason they always know that piece of information. But my sister is an Aquarius, and that just means that she has a thirst for knowledge that is beyond, typical understanding. She's a person who is always trying to see what else is out there. She's a person who believes that there's no such thing really as impossible, and I think that's really amazing because it allows me to consider the same. We are entirely different sorts of people with how we navigate the world. And so learning to coexist with a sibling, I think, was my first microcosm into the world of astrology and the differences of personality. So I'm really excited for us to get into say what later on in this episode. But as always, I'm going to leave you with that tease of information because right now it's time for Word to the Wise. Are y'all ready to get into it? All right, let's go. All right, y'all. So let's get into this week's Word to the Wise. I really actually, and just, in case anybody's curious, because my sister actually got a peep into how I, prepare for my episodes and how I do my research. And when it comes to Word to the Wise, y'all, there are so many different things that I read or that I've read, just over the course of time, honestly, whether it's through a book or if I'm on Pinterest or if I'm on Instagram. There are so many ways that we access information in our day and age. And sometimes, and I've mentioned this before, sometimes I just come across something that I read and it is a reminder to remain steadfast in being true to myself, or remembering what matters most in life, or remembering that so many things that we place value on in this lifetime, whether it's things that are materialistic, whether it's, conflicts or emotional spaces of doubt that we exist in. It's just these words from people who have navigated through life just like I have and who have overcome their own obstacles. It's a reminder to me a lot of the time to just stay grounded and stay true to the aspects of ourselves that are most pure. So when I'm looking for, quotes, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for things that remind me to stay most pure to my heart, to the core of who I am, to my principle, to my essence. So hopefully that kind of gives y'all an idea of really how I come up with these quotes, not come up with them, but really how I find them and why they mean so much to me. It really isn't me just spouting off words, that are meant to just sound like, these almost copy and paste sort of narratives. Not at all. These are words that sometimes I need to hear for myself, that I need to say to myself where I want to go and what I want to align with. So hopefully, that is what these quotes will do for you. And I actually found a few this week, and it was really difficult for me to pick. But what I really loved about all three of them is that they were really all about self care and believing in yourself. So it's from three beautiful black women, and I really couldn't pick, so I have three for you. I'm going to read them out loud, and I'm going to let them sit with y'all because I'm not really sure I need to add additional words to them, but we'll see what comes to mind. So the first one is from Audre Lorde. And Audre Lorde was an American writer, feminist, womanist, librarian, civil rights activist. She really did it all. She described herself as a black lesbian, mother, warrior, poet. She really, her poems and her prose, they largely dealt with issues related to civil rights, feminism, lesbianism, illness and disability, and the exploration of black female identity. So, obviously, a lot of topics, a lot of areas that are really close to my heart and that I really relate to and identify with in many ways. But this is the quote from Audre Lorde, which is: caring for myself is not self indulgence, it is self preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. So that's your first quote. Hold that, carry that, hold space for that. The next one is from everybody's favorite. Everybody's favorite. Like, I don't know if there's anything else I can say because it's from Beyonce. Now, I know some people are not a fan of Beyonce, but I'm just going to say Beyonce is one of the world's best selling recording artists. She is a Virgo to a T, y'all. She has won so many different awards. But I think the most beautiful thing about Beyonce, just in my experience of her as a fan, is seeing her become so comfortable in her own skin and owning who she is. I think even though we don't really know Beyonce at her core, because I don't think you can really know anyone in the public eye at their core, it has been phenomenal to see her be unapologetic about her truth, about her blackness, about her womanhood, about her relationship, about what she desires in life. And so I really loved this quote as well, which is: it is so liberating to really know what I want and what truly makes me happy, what I will not tolerate. I have learned that it is no one else's job to take care of me but me. I thought that was I let's move on to the third quote. The last quote, y'all, because I think good things come in threes, and the last quote is from Michelle Obama. Come on now. Who, is described as an American attorney and author, but the real tea is that she is our first lady forever and always. And she is also the first African American woman to serve in that position. And she's married to Obama. So, I mean, I really think that kind of covers, what people need to know about her. But I think a lot of things that she shares through her words, through her quotes, really gives you a full scope of the woman and the person that she is, and someone who I really admire. So this last quote for you for Word to the Wise, words from the wise really, is: you may not always have a comfortable life, and you will not always be able to solve all the world's problems at once. But don't ever underestimate the importance you can have, because history has shown us that courage can be contagious and hope can take on a life of its own. So that last one isn't as tied to the other two, but what I really loved about they are all about ownership of self. They are all about believing in the greatest parts of yourself. They are all about taking care of yourself and nurturing yourself and caring for yourself and understanding that when you invest in yourself, when you invest in the parts of you that need more care, in the parts of you that need more love, in the parts of you that need more encouragement. When you look at yourself and you say, I'm proud of you, when you look at yourself and you say, okay, we had a trigger, why did we? Let's work on that. When you look at yourself and you recognize your strengths, really, when you become yourself, when you become unapologetic about who you are and what you desire and what you want to leave behind in this world, I just don't think you can go wrong. Because the reality is, there really is no right and wrong. There's only lessons and moving forward and evolving and growing. And I think that was a really difficult thing for me to learn. It's really interesting being back at home and being back in the home that I grew up in, in my childhood home, because there's so many feelings I have being back here. I think I have so many wonderful memories, but there are also a lot of tough memories here. Growing up, I think a lot of times I didn't feel seen, or I felt that parts of my personality had to be muted in order for me to find success, or parts of my dreams had to be muted in order for me to find success. And the reality is, your parents do the best with what they know, right? That's your first form of structure, is really what your parents teach you and how they tell you how to navigate the world. But the more you enter into spaces independently, when you go to school, when you get your first job, when you have your first group of friends, when you get into your first relationship, there are things you can't ever prepare for. And with that, sometimes comes all these beautiful experiences, and sometimes there comes things that just are triggering for you or end up causing you pain. And just over life, as you grow, those things can sometimes be a catapult for you to follow certain dreams or desires, or they can be a hindrance, you know? So I think as we grow older, sometimes we lose that childlike view of the world, this kind of magical kaleidoscope of seeing all the things that are possible, not only around us, but within ourselves. And I feel like these three quotes reminded me to not lose that kaleidoscope vision and to realize every experience you have, everything that you're going through, everything that you're navigating through, even in the lowest moments of your life, they are literally forming you into the butterfly that you're supposed to be. You are in a cocoon, growing and stretching and breaking and remolding and reprogramming. And I think knowing that about yourself, owning that about yourself, owning those mistakes, owning those errors and learning from them, owning those parts of yourself that feel pain, owning those parts of yourselves that have not been validated in the past, really learning to care for every part of who you are and everything you've been through and every experience you have, and knowing that it has brought you to this point in time and in life, it shapes you differently. It allows you to have gratitude in different ways. And I really want to go back to Audre Lorde, when she said, caring for myself is not a self indulgence. I think sometimes we really get wrapped up in the idea that putting others before ourselves makes us a good person. But if you're burnt out at the end of the day, if you feel like no one is doing the same for you, then you become resentful. And in reality, if everybody is out here really taking care of themselves and making sure they're the best versions of themselves and doing that for the other people around them, inspiring them and encouraging them to do the same, then aren't we all on the same playing field at that point? Aren't we all equitably caring for each other and caring for ourselves and loving for one another and loving ourselves? And that is liberating, like Beyonce said, because you're not sacrificing anything. Someone will meet you exactly where you are in a friendship, in a relationship, in your work, in your desires, in your dreams, in your hopes, in your purpose. All those things, they start to become uniformed in a way that feels more organic. And there's something really beautiful about that that gives way to you not underestimating your importance. I truly believe that nobody's here by accident. I think everything is interconnected and everything serves a purpose. And to me, this experience of life is about exploring that. I don't think living is about one standard of success or one way of measuring ourselves. It's about going through these experiences and finding out and exploring who you are and what you can leave behind and the impact that you can have. And so I just loved all three of these quotes. It really put me in the headspace of really wanting to invest in myself and love myself and understand myself more, because the more I'm able to do that, the more I'm able to let somebody do the same. You know, the more space I can allow for other people when I allow space for myself. It's a mirror, it's twofold. So that was really just, as always, you know, I go in extreme places, y'all. I go in tangents, I go here, I go there, point A to point Z, and I bring it all the way back to the middle of the alphabet, and I don't know what letter that is, but here we are. So that was your word to the wise this week, y'all. I really had to do a threefold because I couldn't pick just one. All of those quotes were really inspiring to me, and it really put me in a headspace of just realizing how far I've come and how much work I've done to remove myself from things I don't align with, even in my home, even in my childhood home, and letting go of the things that have caused me pain, or the things that have caused me resentment in the past, and looking at them through a new lens of gratitude because I'm not there anymore. I'm here. And I'm so thankful for that. So hopefully those words inspire you. Hopefully that loop de loop of my thought process inspires you in some way, shape, or form. And now it's time to get into the real tea, which is, are you for real? All right, y'all. So let's get into it. So I have a couple of thoughts this week for Are You For Real? I'm going to talk about three different things. I want to talk about the vaccine a little bit and about masks, the recent announcement made by the White House about not wearing masks. I would love to talk about Billie Eilish, very specifically about the new pictures that came out where she's growing into her womanhood and what everybody's got to say about that. And the last topic that I really want to talk about is Chris Brown, which is a little unexpected because I don't know if you all remember, but in a previous episode, actually in the first episode with Trey, I mentioned that I am completely tuned out of Chris Brown's life and his musical trajectory. And as my sister said, she wasn't even aware that this man was still relevant, which is pretty common for my sister to say, so not really too much of a surprise there for me. But I do want to talk about those three subjects. So let's get into the first one. So I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but on April 27th, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention said that people who are fully vaccinated do not need to wear a mask when they're outdoors unless they're in a crowd, such as attending a live performance, a sporting event, or parade. So, if you're walking or running or biking, if you're attending a small gathering, or people who are, whether they're fully vaccinated or unvaccinated, if you're dining indoors or outdoors, if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. And I I feel a type of way about it because I feel like we are still so much in the throes of a really scary pandemic, a really scary pizza pie, a really scary penny proud. And I really love how people are coming up with different P names, to kind of really, I think, not make a situation that's serious comical, but honestly trying to find a new normal. And the reason I feel a type of way about it is because I feel like many people will use that as an excuse to not do the right thing. And I think also we are already trying to speed up a process. And I think that immediate gratification is such an issue in Western civilization. We want things right now when we expect it. If we don't get what we want in that moment in time, we are incredibly selfish about it. And I think that's dangerous because I'm sure people are also aware that in India there have been spikes, with the cases of COVID, and they are not out of the woods yet at all. And so I think it's important for us to continue to be mindful, even if we are vaccinated, that we be mindful of the spaces we show up in and being careful about what we're doing and how privileged we may be able to walk around without a mask on and what that really says. Like, it doesn't mean we're out of the woods or we're out of the park just because it's no longer our experience to be in this deep place of quarantine, So I think it's really important that people just be mindful of their surroundings still. Just because, something was released by the government telling us one thing doesn't mean that we all of a sudden shouldn't do our duty, and being mindful of the people that are around us. So that was really just my brief opinion on that. But I did want to chat a little bit about the vaccination. I did get vaccinated. I got the Pfizer vaccine, but I have a few friends and family members who have actively decided not to get vaccinated. And I have found that I was reading different articles about it actually, and a lot of people are getting shamed for that decision, and a lot of people are being called un American, and a lot of people are being told that they're not doing their part for the greater good and the common good. And I just kind of want to, maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but I'm just going to toss it out there. A year ago, when we were really in the midst of all this, we had been told time and time again by the CDC and by Dr. Fauci that it takes longer than a year to create a vaccine, that a lot of testing has to be done, that there's a lot of medical research, that there may be side effects that we need to be aware of. And I don't know about anybody else, but at the end of the year, when we were told that there was not only one, but three vaccines available, I was caught off guard and I was hesitant and I was unsure because how is it that you've told us one thing and you've made it seem like it's set in stone and it's factual and that really we should be managing our expectations of time so that we're not expecting something within a year, and now you're giving us three different options and you're telling us they're basically foolproof and they're fail safe, and then we learned not too long ago that J&J, that vaccine is actually only 80 something percent, you know, foolproof. And not only that, they had to be recalled at a certain point. There's so much different information floating around about the safety of these vaccines. And not only the safety, but the impact they can have, the side effects that they may have. And if someone has pre existing conditions, that's something that they may want to be more mindful of. And for some people, maybe they just want to wait a little bit longer to see what truly is the outcome and what is the impact it's going to have on the public at large. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with people taking more time or having more discretion, particularly if they're continuing to adhere to the rules that have been put in place with quarantine and wearing their mask in public and being mindful of the spaces they're operating in and what they're touching and being mindful of their own health. Like, I think we really need to stop just throwing the bandwagon on people and assuming that everybody is supposed to jump on, and if they don't, that makes them un-American. What's un-American is y'all sitting here and rushing people to make choices that may not be best for them. What's un-American is the inequitable distribution of the vaccine to people. You got rich people getting access to it immediately so they can travel and go to where they want, and you still have people dying in their communities that are under-resourced and underprivileged, who you call the ghetto, which y'all created. So it's very interesting what we're prioritizing, what we're putting our focus on, and who we're calling un-American. What's un-American is the last administration we had to deal with and how they dealt with this vaccine and how they dealt with COVID in the first place. That's what's un-American. We're finally getting back to having quote-unquote American values. So I really think that inserting shame or inserting phrases like that, or just really these harsh critiques of people who really want to take their time in understanding the trajectory of what this vaccine will do and the impact it will have, it's just not okay. And it's not a necessity. We should be able to have a conversation and validate anybody's feelings about it and why they may have fears of it. I know a big thing that people are learning about vaccines within the Black community is that there's a lot of fear that exists because a lot of the time Black folks were used as experiments, and we were being injected with random ingredients and materials and whatnot that really could have caused harm to our DNA, to our bodies, who knows what. I'm not trying to get extreme with it. I am not a scientist by any means, and I am not a historical savant by any means, but I do know that that fear is rooted in accuracy, and we shouldn't be treating it as something that it's dismissive, because that's generational trauma in a lot of ways. And even for folks where that doesn't even apply to them, that history, it still can be scary to put something in your body when you don't feel like you have enough information about it, and when you also feel that there are so many gray areas by the people who've been put in charge. That's the T. I decided to take the vaccine because of my own medical history. I felt that it was a risk I could take. I talked to many different friends, I did my research, and I felt that with my own medical history, the likelihood of me having a negative response to it was slim enough, and that I want to be able to see my family more comfortably, my grandparents, my mother, my father, my sister. That was my choice, though. And I do think someone can have the choice not to take it, at least at this point in time. Do I have an opinion if someone will eventually, should everyone be required to take it? I don't know. I really don't know. But I do know that I'm not going to look at anybody and judge them a type of way if it's not the choice that they make, especially if they're continuing to do their part. So I think people are doing their best to navigate a very difficult time and a very uncertain time still in 2021. And in reality, I think it's more about having a dialogue with people about why you made the choice that you made if you decided to get vaccinated, and understanding why someone is not making that choice. And if you feel that there's more information you can provide that can maybe perhaps make them more comfortable, do that. But also hear them out if they have a viewpoint that you did not consider. So I really do think this is a space and a time for us to continue to learn from each other and to recover from what has been an incredibly difficult year and some change, and continues to be an incredibly difficult year and some change. So I don't think there's space for shame in conversation in general. I just don't think it's a useful tool to convince anybody to do anything that we think is right. Nothing that is right should be associated with shame or associated with guilt. I really think we need to operate from more spaces of understanding. So that's my tea on the vaccine. That's my tea on the mask. I really do think that we really need to still be mindful. This is not an opportunity for everybody to go on like fun spring break or fun summertime. And, there was like this ridiculous meme that I saw on Instagram. It wasn't a meme, but one of those posts. I don't even know what they call it, y'all. Dino Dash over here. But it said, it was like a CDC announcement. It was like now people who got vaccinated can spit in each other's mouths, which is actually disgusting when I think about it. But those are the extremes I think people feel when we're sitting here and saying like you can walk around without a mask now, because the reality is some people will use that as an excuse who haven't been doing their part to do exactly what they always wanted to, which is to take their mask off and do whatever the hell they wanted. So I do think it's really important to still be mindful and to not show up in spaces and be selfish, to not be in crowded spaces doing whatever the heck you want, and acting like there is still not a pandemic taking place. There is still a pandemic taking place, and yes, some of the smoke is cleared. We can see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not at the end of the tunnel. We're getting closer. And it's important, to remember that and to continue to implement patience in our lives as we see the recovery unfold and take place. So, to jump into a different topic, into a different subject, Billie Eilish. Billie Eilish, y'all. So, I think at this point everybody knows who Billie Eilish is, but she's an American singer and songwriter. She first gained attention in 2015 when she uploaded the song Ocean Eyes on SoundCloud. Shout out to SoundCloud, y'all. You can also listen to Just a Dash on SoundCloud. And subsequently, since then, she has written and produced with her brother Phineas, whom she collaborates with on music and live shows. And her EP, Don't Smile at Me, was a sleeper hit. And then she had her most recent album that came out, which is When We Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? So, great album, by the way. I think Billie Eilish is a very interesting person to me, particularly because she's just so young and her lyrics have very dark themes sometimes. And, she has openly in interviews spoken about things that she's dealt with in her life, including depression. She has Tourette syndrome. She also experiences synesthesia, which is pretty cool. But what I really want to talk about, though, in relation to Billie Eilish is body dysmorphia, which is a mental health condition that causes a person to spend an inordinate amount of time worrying about their appearance. And this is something she has said that she has dealt with. And I think everyone has, up until this point, really seen Billie Eilish speak openly about her struggles, but also combat the obsession that Hollywood may have with women's bodies by dressing however the hell she wants. She'll wear baggy clothes. She has said that she dresses like a swaggy boy sometimes or a swaggy girl. I do think some of that is an expression of her fashion, but I think a lot of it was her way of combating people having an opinion on the shape of her body and what she looks like. And she actually said she stepped out one time on the beach and she mentioned that she was being shamed for her appearance. And she was wearing a tank top one day and people were like saying she got fat. And she was like, nope, this is how I look like. You've just never seen it before. So I'm bringing this all up because Billie Eilish most recently released photos where she is dressed beautifully. She's wearing she's wearing like a form fitting corset, or she has a trench coat on. She just looks glamorous, honestly. And she's entering a new era of her life and a new era of her music and a new era of her womanhood. And I just thought it was an interesting response that many people had to it. You had some people saying that she was a sellout because she said she would never be showing off her body in a certain way. And then you had people who were praising her for, showing off her sensuality or her sexuality. And it's just really interesting to me that as a young woman in the public eye, her growth into her body, which is an incredibly personal thing, is a subject. It's a topic for conversation. And I wonder why that is. It pulled me back into the Britney Spears documentary that I had watched. And it was the same thing back then when I was a kid in the 90s. And here we are in 2021 and we're doing this to a 19-year-old again. And it's just, what is so fascinating to us about the woman's body? Is it not, do we not understand that it's a norm that we grow into our breasts and we grow into our asses and we grow into our hips and that our bodies serve various purposes as women. For some of us, it's child rearing, and for some of us, it's sexuality. For some of us, it's a form of expression. My favorite word, here it comes again, we are multifaceted. Women are multifaceted beings, and it goes beyond just our physicality. But just thinking about it, I think we really need to learn to just let people exist within their bodies without placing these sorts of expectations on them about what it's supposed to mean. Billie Eilish deciding to wear a corset and wear a trench coat on Vogue and look hella cute and hella fly and look like a pinup girl is dope. And we can celebrate the fact that she is owning that and celebrating that, but it shouldn't be a topic of conversation about what it means that she's choosing to do so. All it means is that this young woman grew up and she's finally realizing that she doesn't owe anybody an explanation about how she chooses to express herself or when she chooses to express herself, and that she can love her body exactly how she wants, when she wants, and presents it however she wants. I really think it's that simple. So I just thought it was really interesting. She had addressed, you know, what people thought about her body and how they were talking about her body in a short film. She released it on YouTube after her tour. And this was back in March. And I remember that tour was canceled because of the coronavirus. But in that video, she's basically talking about how she doesn't owe anybody an explanation for how she chooses to express herself or when she chooses to show her body or not. And it's not her responsibility how people react to her. And I think that's really true, and I think that's really real. And I just think it's really encouraging to see someone her age take ownership of that and reconstruct the narrative that has existed so long in Hollywood when it comes to women and how they are seen and interpreted and how that's associated with their success. Billie Eilish deciding to wear a corset doesn't change how great her music is or was. And I hope that we can move away from this being a topic that suggests otherwise. So I just thought it was really curious. I'm really curious what people's opinions are of us constantly creating so much recognition and fodder around, those transitions that someone experiences in their life. I remember for myself, in my 13, 14, 15-year-old body as it was changing, it was really embarrassing for me when family members would come and comment over the size of my breast or tell me I've gained weight or I've lost weight. I hope that we can exist in a space moving forward where those topics don't define women. They are not the top of the conversation about what it means for someone to evolve. I think it was beautifully done the way she chose to share that aspect of her story, to share how she's overcome aspects of her body dysmorphia. But I also feel like those are really personal experiences that we don't owe to other people. And I hope one day we can just stop talking about those things as if they define people, because they don't. Someone's weight, someone's shape, someone's style, it has nothing to do with who someone is at their core. And I hope we stop defining people by what they look like and more so define them by their behaviors and their actions, which actually leads me to my last topic, which is Sea Breezy Chris Brown. Let's get into it. So, I don't think it's a secret at this point that I am personally not a fan of Chris Brown. And it goes beyond his music. I do think his music is pretty mediocre, and just because I think it's because he's done the same formula, I don't think he's changed up his formula. And that's actually kind of important for me to say. So, anyway, before I even jump into it, let's give a little more context. So, Chris Brown is an American singer, rapper, songwriter, dancer, actor. He had a really promising, and I mean obviously still does, but he really had a super promising career. Like, he definitely started when he was very young. I think he must have been in his early teens when he blew up, and he was pretty successful you know from the jump, and I think he really had a more wholesome, I would say, image, I guess is. And here's the thing, I just want to start off by saying that lots of artists and musicians can be horrible people, and they can be no fun to be around. But I think there's a huge difference between being a diva or a hateful prima donna or a ruthless band leader than being caught red-handed repeatedly committing violent acts and abusive acts. And that's where I kind of have to draw a line in the sand when it comes to Chris Brown. So the reason I'm bringing up this topic is because I have found I watch a lot of dance videos. I love to dance. I love choreography. I love choreographers. I think it's just a beautiful art form. And something that I have found to just be a continuous trend throughout the years is Chris Brown's music being so prevalent and being so sought out. It's really a huge thing. And most recently, there's a dancer who I follow. His name is Howard Johnson. He's also blowing up and being this TikTok star. And he can't be older than 2021. He's pretty young. And he is, I think he's Latin and African American. He's a young man of color. He's gay. And he is doing his thing. He's incredibly flexible. He does really funny content. But he recently posted about his one of his dreams coming true, which was dancing for Chris Brown in one of these classes by this other choreographer who I love. Her name is Nicole. Her name is Nicole Kirkland, and she's also an exceptional choreographer. She just does very sensual movements, and she's just very much into feeling out her femininity, but in spaces that are inclusive. She has, men, women, folks who are trans, folks who identify any sorts of ways, dancing to her music and to her choreography, I should say. And I was surprised because he basically said one of his dreams coming true was dancing for Chris Brown. And I have just found that there's a common trend with dancers, by the way, who exude, a real love for civil rights activism. I would say this is someone who, was also very loud and proud about talking about women's rights and talking about rights for gay people and rights for trans people. To have that kind of then be flipped and someone saying that their dream is to dance for Chris Brown, it always kind of just throws me off. And it throws me off because Chris Brown is not a person who I associate with being mindful of those sorts of issues. I find Chris Brown to actually be detrimental to the progress of treating women with respect and treating women equitably in all spaces and even within his industry. And I say that because of his history, and not only his history, but his current actions. So I was really curious, and I had this conversation with my roommate Simone as well, as to why Chris Brown is still famous when he has shown no remorse for his actions. And I really kind of wanted to see what people associate with Chris Brown, and I wanted to pose the question about how we expect people to change if we continue to reward them for bad behavior. So, in a recent Google search I did with Chris Brown, his name in the word violence and women has over 6 million hits, including several detailed lists of the legal tangles that he is still currently in. And his explosive temper, Rolling Stone even has a piece called The Timeline of Chris Brown's History of Violence Towards Women. And in some places, actually, he has his own dedicated thread on the U.S. National Domestic Violence Hotline website. So I really, he's been accused of stealing a woman's phone, shoving women to the floor, forcibly ejecting women from vehicles, punching women in the face in a Las Vegas nightclub. And most recently, in 2019, he was accused of rape, and it was dismissed, but it's really along a whole long line of other actions that have been taken. I think people most know his first act really was, or his first known act of violence was against Rihanna. And the way that that all unfolded, I think, was very interesting in the public eye, including Rihanna's response to it. And obviously, how her career has really unfolded since then, and how she has reclaimed her power. And even their relationship has been on and off in a lot of ways. But it's just really a curious thing to me because I don't know about anybody else, but Chris Brown has stated that he has regrets, but in reality, his actions have never shown any remorse. And to me, actions speak louder than regrets. And many of his actions don't signify any progress. The only way I would think that there would be any progress is if the industry turned their back on them. But it's interesting because I find that it's the dance community that keeps Chris Brown's career so strong and alive. And it was fascinating to me. I actually couldn't find a lot of information on why that is, but it was a curious thing because anytime I looked up fun facts about Chris Brown, it was the very first one was that Chris Brown loves to dance. And he started dancing before he was even out of diapers, and he hasn't stopped yet. And it's a huge part of his life. And so it's really starting to occur to me that the reason Chris Brown's career continues to be successful is because he has found a way to manipulate the industry through dance. And he continues to use choreographers as a way to keep his music career alive. And it really weirds me out because it's really a dichotomy that is harmful to the progress of these movements when we're talking about women and even when we're talking about the LGBT community. And when you have someone like Howard Johnson sitting there and saying that his dream is coming true to dance for Chris Brown, I just wonder how mindful are we being of the accountability we're asking for people on public platforms and in these spaces? And what are we saying to the people who were abused or harmed by this person? I'm not saying that Chris Brown operates on the same extreme as, let's say, R. Kelly or as Harvey Weinstein. I'm not trying to, this isn't a game of comparison in that way. But what I am saying is that you have a young man. Chris Brown is young, and he's walking through life thinking that the actions that he takes towards women don't have any consequences. And it's because we allow him to believe that. And we allow him to continue to operate in these spaces where he's still causing harm to women, even now in 2021. And it's really shocking because over the last 10 years, his music continues to top the Billboard charts. And it's so curious to me that even when you're looking up these incidences, they exist, but so does his fame. And it ties into what Trey was talking about with clout and how we just allow people to do harmful things and say that, well, that's just the way life is sometimes. And I don't think that should be the case. I think that we really need to start looking at people who are in the public eye and in the industry and deprive them of the attention they so crave. I can't say that I believe that that's actually going to happen, but I really do think it's important for us to look at the repeated accusations that have taken course over the last few years and actually delete those people from our music libraries, from our dancing industries. I will tell you personally, I do not watch a video if Chris Brown's music is played in it. I do not watch a dance video if Chris Brown's music is played in it because in reality, there's no remorse and there's no regret for his actions. I don't see any growth in this person. He keeps getting a free ride. And it's wild to think about that, especially in the Me Too era. Much of this is because of the loyalty of his fans. I even remember when the whole thing happened with Rihanna, I had a cousin who was trying to defend his actions by saying that Rihanna also hit him or that Rihanna, must have done something to upset him. What are we doing excusing any sort of violent behavior towards women because a man can sing? Because a man has a talent which he obviously misused at this point because he had access and he had fame and he had money and he was given power. And instead of doing good with it, he continues to skate by in ways that most people wouldn't. And we reward him for it. And that is wild to me. It is wild to me that we allowed this person to victim shame, that we allow them to make dogmatic statements about women and lie. Or and here's the thing too. Let me be real. Chris Brown has stated that he was a victim of child abuse and that he witnessed his mother being abused by his stepfather, I believe. And there needs to be space for that. We have to hold validity for that and how that might show up in someone's behaviors in present time. He has also, been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder after one of his stints in rehab, and he was kicked out of a facility one time. There are so many things that I think exist within Chris Brown that should not be dismissed or, you know, he's a human being. And I don't want to make it seem like we should be sitting down and hating Chris Brown and just canceling him without offering any sort of resolution on how, he can be held accountable for the error of his ways. But I do think we need, when in doing so, there has to be an actual constructive way of holding someone accountable where it doesn't allow them to skate by and skirt by without taking any responsibility for his actions. Chris Brown needs help. Somebody needs to assess Chris Brown's actions and his behaviors and his triggers and his traumas and the motivations of his actions instead of just saying yes to him. And Chris Brown isn't the only Chris Brown in the world. This applies to so many people in the Hollywood industry. But I really, really, again, want to pose the challenge to people when we're looking at people in the public eye who do harmful actions that are detrimental to things that we are trying to move past, to progressive movements that we are trying to normalize, such as treating with women with respect, such as moving away from abusive acts, harmful lyrics, harmful content towards women, then we have to look at their actions and we have to look at their remorse and we have to look at how they're choosing to move forward in the public eye. Chris Brown has just found another way to skirt into the industry and get what he wants and get what he needs so that he can continue to do his harmful behavior. He's not going to do anything differently until we, as a collective, as people who enjoy music, even as his fans, hold him accountable and say to him, this is not okay. And you can do better. And I know you can do better. Not only for the women who you sing to and who you claim to love, but also for yourself. What does that say about him as a man? What does that say about him as a father? He has a young child. And that's something to consider too. This is beyond Chris Brown. There is a new generation of kids coming up, y'all. And you have Howard Johnson, who is 19, 20, 21, however old he is. I'm 29 years old. And I've been seeing someone like Chris Brown causing harm to women, causing harm to young men as well, because they assume that this is okay, that you can still achieve success, that you can still skirt by with this sort of behavior, that you can still treat a woman like that and still make your money and still make your coin and still have your clout and still have your fame. What are we saying? We hold a responsibility as a society to say, no, that's not okay. You're not going to keep making money. We're not going to drink the Kool-Aid. And the domestic abuse that continues to exist within these spaces cannot be ignored. So, personally, I'm just saying, as someone who enjoys dance, who enjoys choreography, who enjoys seeing the talents of choreographers, if you are a choreographer, if you are a dancer, you're listening to this, or you're friends with someone, I would love to have a conversation with them about this, why it's something that they continue to play into, why they continue to allow this man's career to flourish despite the fact that he has not taken any true accountability for his actions or made any changes in his life. We really want to see the world change, if we really want to see the behaviors change, whether in gender constructs, whether in an industry, we can't allow those things to continue. And we can't sit back and say that we don't have a part in it or that we hold no responsibility in it. It just doesn't make sense. And it's really about collective change and collective accountability, because at the end of the day, we're just as responsible if we allow this man to continue and we allow him to believe that his behavior and his actions are okay. So I'm going to end it simply by saying that there are way too many red flags for us to be ignoring. And in reality, while Chris Brown is incredibly talented, and I give him credit for that, and I think that that should be recognized, it should be recognized in a place of true growth, of true evolution. Someone shouldn't stay the way they are if the trajectory of their talent actually causes harm to people. holistically, comprehensively. So I'm challenging people, and it's not just for Chris Brown. There are many, and I'm going to be real, there are many artists who I listen to where I learn about them after the fact, and I'm just like, whoa, the way they treated this person wasn't okay. Wow, the way they spoke to this person wasn't okay. Or I'm learning about situations after the fact about people who abused women who they were married to or men who they were married to. None of that is okay, y'all. And it's not about that action in the present moment, it's how somebody responds to it. Because the reality is, people make those sorts of mistakes and it's incredibly harmful and it's inexcusable. But it's whether someone is continuing to choose the same mistakes that matters to me. If you're choosing to change, if you're choosing to do something differently, to recognize your harm and choosing to do something different with that information that leads to progress, I can respect you. I have no respect for Chris Brown. And quite frankly, it also makes me lose respect for the people who continue to work with him and who continue to ignore the reality, the truth of the situation. We can't ignore the truth, y'all. The truth always comes out. And the truth will always hold us all accountable. So, really, what I'm saying is if we want people to change, if we truly love Chris Brown and we truly want to see him become the best version of himself and we truly want to see what his talent can do, how about we ask him to stop doing the harmful things he's done? How about we ask him to be the best version of himself in whatever spaces he shows up in the music industry and outside of the music industry. So I think that that's a larger conversation. I think I'm going to dive a little bit more into why Chris Brown's career has continued to be so successful, because it really just blows my mind sometimes that after all this time and after all the harm this man still causes, the things he says on Twitter, the videos that have been released, the statements that have been made about him, the accusations that have been made about him, it's insane to me. It is insane to me that we are still here and we are still treating this man like he deserves our love and respect. Let's get real, y'all. It's time to get real. It's 2021 and it's time to dead that energy. It's time to dead things like that. It's time for people to recognize that we don't align with that shit no more and we're not dealing with it. And I'm the first to tell you that I'm just not down for it. And so I hope we can do better as a society, and I hope we can ask better of Chris Brown moving forward. And that's it. Those are all our topics for Are You For Real this week, y'all. I'm very curious what, people, I'm sure some people will be in opposition to me. I know there's a lot of holes that can be poked when we're talking about Chris Brown or even when we're talking about Billie Eilish, when we're talking about COVID. I don't have all the answers. I think these are subject areas and topics that I think I'm just constantly thinking about and I'm confused by or I'm intrigued by, and I might return to them. I might talk to someone about, violence in the industry and violence in music and why it continues to persist, and really what are actionable steps that we can take so that we're holding people accountable, even if we admire their talents, So these are not simple topics. I don't have all the answers. This is just one glimpse as to how I think about this and why it frustrates me. And this is just a space for me to express that. So I'm grateful that y'all are listening. Hopefully, if it's not something you considered before, it plants a seed in your mind about the actions you can take or the ways that you're considering the excuses that you make for people, or the gray areas that you might have for yourself. I know I have them for myself as well when it comes to different artists. So it's really not simple. These are simplex topics, but that was just a dose. We have an exciting conversation coming up about astrology, so take a break if you need to, but make sure you tune in, because next up is Say What?
Just a dash.
We should do a skit. What did you say your name was? Midnight. So I'm recording right now. So we're wearing wigs. We're wearing I love to wear wigs, everyone, and I attribute this to my Gemini rising, although Naika thinks it has something to do with the Leo that's in my chart, which is a perfect transition. I'm very excited for this conversation, everyone. I'm here with a very special person in my life. The person who introduced me to astrology. When I was a kid, I really got into Greek mythology, which I think was the gateway for me to learn about astrology. But my sister who is my guest today.
Hello, hello, hello.
Yes, is really my true gateway into astrology and personally the expert to me, and who I learn from and who continues to keep me informed and really has a passion for learning about this subject. And before we even get started and we dive into what we're going to be talking about today, just like my other guests, even though this is my sister who I have with me today, and her name is Naika. I also call her Cookie, so you might hear me call her that throughout the episode. I call her Cook. I'm going to have her introduce herself. So, Naika, please tell the people who you are, what you do, and why you love what you do. And don't say your name is Midnight. That's the name she chose for herself, y'all, because she's wearing a blue wig right now. We just had a mini dance party, but...
Okay, nice to meet everyone. And this blue wig is amazing. My name is Naika Gabriel, and essentially I am artist and founder of the Medicine Women Project. I am building it right off the ground, but really it's been in my heart for as long as I remember. And I am creating a space, a community, and art that celebrates women and honors women, because I feel as though we have a hard time acknowledging for ourselves and believing for ourselves that we have all that we need and that we are worthy of love and respect. And I'm kind of over that. I am over us underestimating who we are. And I sincerely believe we have all the universe inside of us, inside our wombs. And I want to help illuminate that and be on that journey with other women as they start understanding who they are and what they can create. And I love what I do because I am a woman, and it's just such a beautiful journey for myself to keep learning about myself and what I am worth and who I am, what I deserve, what I'm capable of. And it's just been so much fun, literally squashing all the untruths and lies and people telling me what I can and can't do. It's just like poof, 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 poof. It's like, bye. It's not true. It's absolutely not true. And that power that comes from within, that cannot be quelled. I'm like finding it out for myself. And so I'm like, it's not just me. It is not just me. And I want to share this realization with other women and help them realize it for themselves. So that's what I love it because I love me.
It's been a true journey. Yeah. And it continues to be a true journey. Also, just a heads up, I said this in the beginning too, but this is also a special episode because this is a different setup for podcasting from home. I'm podcasting from the house I was raised in Florida, in South Florida. I like to say my hometown is Miami, but we live in Broward County. We live in Coral Springs, and it's hella hot in Florida, so the fan is on in the background, and I am not sorry for it. So if you hear it, that's why it's on. We were going to record outside, but fun fact, in Florida, people mow their lawns every 2 seconds every day. So we moved it inside Naika's room. This is the room that we grew up in. You can't see it, but we're surrounded by our baby pictures, by art that we've created, by paper cranes, and it's just a really special space for us. I think when we come back home to, there's a lot of memories in this room, so it's really special to be sitting here with my sister. And obviously, Naika spoke about her journey and, womanhood and how that has shaped her and how she's continuing to use that to really rewrite the narratives and the constructs and the conditioning that a lot of us have experienced growing up. And I think a big part, I would say, of your journey in doing that, astrology has been a big part of that, and learning to understand yourself more. So that is what we're going to talk about today. But before we even dive into the questions, as always, y'all, I always love to do a little bit of research on the subject. The reason also, I always was going to have an episode about astrology, but I think the reason why it feels so relevant to have it now is because after 2020, I think a lot of people, they looked at life a little bit differently. I think they looked at what it means to exist in the present and what it means to look to the future a little bit differently. And so, to give some backstory to astrology, it's defined as the divination of the supposed influence of the stars and planets on human affairs and terrestrial events by their positions and aspects, which probably sounds like a lot. So to simplify that just means that I think the simplest definition that people have heard is things are written in the stars. But because so much is still unknown about the universe, astrology can also include a degree of faith alongside premonitions or readings. And that being said, countless people still check their horoscopes on a daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly basis. And I'm sure for many people, I know for myself, my first introduction to astrology was on the back of a women's magazine, where there's astrology sections that give readers brief predictions about what's in store for them under their specific astrological signs, their zodiac signs. But I think that's where the gray area begins. And I'm always talking to my sister about this because astrology is a curious and intriguing subject for many people, but I think it's also very easily commercialized and commodified. So, according to Google Trends, searches for birth chart and astrology hit a 5-year search peak last year in 2020, and many professional astrologers report that their businesses took off under quarantine lockdown, which I think, Naika, you saw like on Instagram.
Yeah, my friend got a lot of business. She is getting a lot of business.
It's huge now. Like, I think, and it's really become a trend for people to learn about astrology and learn about their star signs. TikTok, which Naika and I are on the same page when it comes to this. I don't know anything about TikTok. I have no interest, but it is the fastest growing app in terms of monthly active users. And they introduced a generation of newcomers to the language of the zodiac, and it made internet celebrities out of very successful astrological accounts. So there's a new wave of astrologers. They're younger, they're more diverse in the industry than we've ever known before, and it's essentially sprouted across social media. So like I said before, I think it's safe to say that 2020 was a shake-up year for many people, and astrology, whether you are someone who believes in it or not, or you just dabble in the idea, it offers a way for us to feel more connected to the world and the universe at large. And it also offers insight into patterns and behaviors that follow a planetary methodology, which I think for many people can feel foreign and familiar at the same time. So I have found as the trend grows, so does the misinformation surrounding the subject. So I really wanted to take the opportunity to talk to someone who not only is informed, but also passionate. I think both those things are really important. Someone who really enjoys talking about a subject, because we're often bombarded with watered down horoscopes about our star signs. I think people have seen memes that poke fun at the intersections of finding your soulmate or, you know, the guidance of the zodiac. And then on the flip side, you have people who are so consumed by their horoscopes that it dictates who they decide they can interact with. So it can feel oversaturated in certain degrees or overwhelming. So I wanted to break it down and learn a little bit more and share a little bit more about this beautiful science that has allowed me personally to have more compassion for the people I encounter in my life, regardless of their signs. So Naika, I have a few questions for you. Are you ready to get started?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. What are you drinking?
Oh, it's golden milk. It's like turmeric dates and this thing called astrological. I don't know how to pronounce it. So, but it's yummy and it has honey in it with almond milk.
Different from the tea that I usually drink, but
yeah,
delicious nonetheless.
It's good.
Okay, so I think we're going to start with the simplest question of all, which is how did you become interested in astrology, and why did you become interested in astrology? Really just what were the beginnings of it for you?
Sure. Well, before I start, if I may, I feel as though more and more people are waking up to the uses and beauty of astrology. And I think, honestly, it's going to go beyond a trend. It's been here for thousands of years. And not just Western astrology, Chinese astrology. And it's different. I mean, there's Mayan astrology. I mean, this is old, thousands of years old. And so I think people are waking up to the fact that we literally, and I know I say this often, but this is the first time y'all are hearing it, you're literally on a planet that's spinning so fast that you cannot feel it. You are in space. You are in a planet, that's on an orbit with other planets. And like, how could we fathom that we don't have influence on the energy outside of us, like in form of planets, and vice versa? I think we have been taught that we are alone and that there's just nothing beyond, or if some of us believe in God, source, whatever you want to call it, there is something, but still there's a separation. It's like, what if that weren't so? What if there were influences, not just from the planets, the sun upon us, but us upon them? And there are amazing books out there. I think I forgot his first name, but Tierney. He has an amazing book out there that actually mirrors the astronomy behind the major events, the major human events, like the plague and all of that, and how every hundred of years or whatever it is, these planets, they form a certain, what we call aspect. They respond to each other in a certain way. Like they're 60 degrees, 90 degrees apart, whatever. But when those things happen, it mirrors what's happening on Earth.
Right.
So what's happening now with the COVID and everything like this, it's mirrored in astrology.
Right.
It's
I mean,
not
I think we were raised Catholic, and even then, I mean, the three wise men, I think they were astrologers.
Yes.
And they followed the stars.
Yes,
That's how they determined major events. That's how they knew where to find Jesus. So I think it's really detailed in so much more history than people maybe are paying attention to.
And I feel like it was demonized, and still people are weary of it because it's associated with the dark arts. But dark means, it's like, how come everything that's labeled as dark is what allows you to know yourself better?
Wow.
And it's associated with the feminine. I've had enough.
So all this you know now, but what first intrigued you about astrology?
So I think I was around, 11 to 13 years old. We were in Barnes & Noble, and I went to that section, like the New Age section, whatever you call it. And so I came across that little red book, and it was all about astrology.
Oh my gosh, that little red book.
It's in my boxes. I remember just flipping through it, and it's like I recognized everything it was saying. Like it just made sense. The language, because I think of astrology, and I was taught this way, like it's a language. It's just a different language. And so I was like, because I already had a knowing all about signs, but I didn't know about moon signs and rising signs, whatever. And it had a Chinese astrology section too, and it just made sense. And if anything, I gravitated toward it. My mom was like, okay, whatever this is, sure, you can have it. I'll buy it for you. But it helped me understand myself and people better. I like to understand. And so it helped me have compassion for others too. But yeah, that's really, it just happened, and I just gravitated towards it, and it was something almost like I already knew it. I understood it. It was just like, oh, here, Naika, remember. So, yeah.
I mean, I think you've always been interested in the sciences in general and how things work and overlap and how life impacts each other. So, yeah, I did feel like a very natural thing, I think, for you to become interested in. And I think you looked at it also from a very practical way. That being said, I do think that astrology can sometimes feel very abstract to people because there's a lot of, you said, it's a language. And sometimes when a language feels foreign to someone, I think it also feels frightening, or it feels like this is overwhelming, or it's too much for me to understand. So I looked up basically the basics of astrology, and I was wondering if you could explain the relevance or really how they line up, how they work, how they overlap. There were 4. There were the planets, the zodiac signs, which the planets are in, the houses, and aspects. So I wondered if we could go through each one and kind of talk about, when we say the planets, what does that mean? I know for me, you've explained the sky almost being a pie that is split up in certain ways. So I was wondering if we could break that down for people.
Yeah, so just think of everything Dashka just said as a story, and there are different characters in the story. So everyone, or most people, know that the sky is divided into constellations. And so the signs are just reflections of certain constellations. There is a constellation called Aries, for example, and then Taurus, and they actually go in that order. So there's 12 signs, 12 constellations. And so the planets in our solar system, and we include, so I'm of the evolution, there's different schools of thought for astrology, by the way. There's medical astrology, there's Vedic astrology, there's, maybe it's called Vedic astrology. There's, I'm of the school of evolutionary astrology. So I believe that we have had multiple lifetimes. Not all schools of astrology believe that. And so when I'm taught, we're taught the basics, but we focus on these bodies or energies called like the north and south node of the moon, as well as Pluto. So that's the emphasis. But anyway, back to the story. The sky, yes, think of it as a pie divided into 12, right? everyone has this in their, if you're going to create a chart. The planets are the what. They're like the what. If you're going to have the who, what, where, when,
I
how.
see. Okay.
So, for example, the sun. The sun represents your ego. It represents how you see and interact with the world. I'm simplifying it.
Right.
With the world. Also, what feeds you in a way. If you're not honoring your sun sign, you're probably going to feel very depleted. And I was an example of that.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't honoring the fact that I'm an Aquarius person.
Mm-hmm.
I did not. I was acting out the other aspects of myself, and so I wasn't really going out and being with people, for example, or being my humanitarian self. I was being another aspect of Aquarius, which is like a hermit.
Mm-hmm.
But I also didn't really embrace the part of me that's just unique. I just wanted to fit in.
Right.
I was tired of people always saying I'm different.
And that's sometimes the challenge.
Yes.
So even to simplify that for folks a little bit too, just if I can, when we're talking about these different planets, like everything also is energetic. So what's feeding your ego, what you gain from that planet energetically is how we're talking. So your sun sign, when we say your ego, it's like the actual essence of who you are at your core, as opposed to your rising sign. I like to think of it as what we present to people. It's almost like the mask you wear so that you can navigate through life. So So for me, I'm a Cancer. That's my star sign. That's my sun sign, but I'm a rising Gemini. So I come across very gregarious to people. I'm very social. But when I'm honoring my Cancer, when I'm honoring my sun sign, I, like my sister was saying, like in terms of being a hermit, I'm a homebody. I like to be home. I actually can be quite introverted. I can be sociable when I need to, but I actually enjoy keeping to myself. So learning more about those aspects, as she was saying, it kind of helps you to have a better understanding of yourself so that you can honor yourself and also just love yourself more and respect who you are more without being apologetic about it. I think growing up, my sister is an Aquarius, and I think I always used to joke, I think before I also was more informed and had an understanding of how all these things overlap, I used to think that Aquariuses, were just spacey people out of this world, never on the planet, never paying attention. But in reality, I think I've come to recognize that Aquariuses help us understand the next steps of evolution, because that's how their mind operates. I think when my sister talks about gravitating towards astrology, it's because you gravitate towards understanding evolution and understanding how we have evolved and gotten to these spaces and how we exist and how we learn to interact and coexist. So I think that kind of mashes it all together, but there's something else that I was hoping you could explain a little bit more, which was the houses.
Right. So, thank you for getting us back on track. So, but before we go to the houses, the planets are just the different characters. So every planet has a different characteristic.
Okay.
So there's all the planets. Everyone knows them. Mars, there's Venus, there's Pluto, Jupiter, and each of them has a list or series of characteristics and qualities, I should say. Mm-hmm. And so the houses represent the where.
Okay.
So let's pretend you have that pie chart, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone can envision it in their heads or their hands.
Okay.
It's 12 pieces. Mm-hmm. Now, there's 12 houses. Mm-hmm. Okay? The first house has its own set of characteristics too. The first house represents yourself. Okay. I'm simplifying it.
Right.
Okay? The second house has to do with like your self-esteem, self-worth, your inner resources. Your third house has to do with the communication, more or less, and siblings and things like this. The fourth house has to do with your ancestry. It has to do with your emotional self. And some people say your mother, some people say your father. Okay. I was, taught mother. Okay. And you can go on. Fifth house has to do with creativity. You're leaving a legacy. And you go. So it's the home.
Okay.
It's where these things play out. Okay. And the sign it's in. So this is another layer. Is the how. Okay. So, for example, everyone was born at a different place at a different time. And so that, all of that interacted, like pushed together or mixed together, dictates what sign is the first house.
Okay.
So, for example, like you were saying, the first house, everyone, by the way, is also your rising sign.
Right.
So, and this is a whole mathematical thing.
So let's use me as an example because I think you know me pretty well, my chart pretty well.
When you were born, based on the whole mathematical and everything like that, your rising is Gemini.
Okay.
So that means your first house, and I won't complicate it, there's different systems, but anyway, your first house is Gemini.
Okay.
Right? And so that means that your second house is...
Oh, yeah.
And then Leo would be your third house, and then Virgo, I think, would be... I'm
Yeah.
just doing off my head. So then I know that the opposite, too, of Gemini is the seventh. So the first house, the opposite is the seventh house, which is Sagittarius.
Okay, so then my seventh house, and this is based on the constellation. When I was born, this is where the planets were located.
This is where the constellations were.
Okay.
When you were born, your sun, literally the sun itself, was in, I think, 23 degrees Cancer.
Okay.
That's where you were. And so when you are born, just imagine an astrology chart as a snapshot.
Okay.
It's just like, ding, ding,
Yeah.
chick, chick. And it's like, oh, this is where all the planets are.
Okay.
And literally, imagine all that energy, in a way, being infused in you. But as you get older, it's expressed through you differently because you get to dictate how you live and how you are. But you are a mishmash of all these beautiful energies, and they work within you and through you. And you are them. Like, you're always changing and evolving. And so someone could literally be born the exact same day, time, and place as you, but the way that those energies are expressed is going to be different.
Based on their experiences.
Based on their experiences, but just who you are. And you're going to use them differently as well, but there's probably going to be some overlapping. That's when people are like, oh, I'm a Cancer, you're a Cancer, we're around the same time.
Right.
You know, you are going to have some similarities, of course. Or if you have a rising sign that's the same, yeah,
right.
you are going to have some similarities.
And you have, and just to also clarify, when we're talking about the planets, that also, because someone said this to me, that does include the sun and the moon.
Yes.
So for Cancer, my associative planet is the moon.
Yes, so then you're bringing another good point. Every sign has a planet that's associated with. It's called the ruler of, and the ruler of that sign.
Okay.
And so that's changed over time as humans have discovered more and more planets.
Okay.
But yes, you as Cancers, you are ruled by the moon. As Aquarius says, at first we were ruled by Saturn. And then as we discovered Uranus, we're like, but people are like, well, doesn't that make astrology like iffy? Like you're always changing. It's like, nah, we're evolving. We're expanding. Isn't that really our nature?
Right.
And so, yeah, I definitely, as an Aquarius, have Saturn influences and qualities for sure.
Yeah.
I don't always like them, but yeah. And then the Uranus, the quirky and the part of me that I can't always predict or whatever, that's erratic, but always wanting to create and push forward. But the Saturn definitely is like, you gotta keep it together.
Right.
You gotta. And
so I was gonna say, so I know that was like a mishmash of information, y'all, but I think feel free to rewind if you need to kind of listen to how Naika broke down the story of the who, the what, the where. But that being said, I think a lot of people only know their sun sign, and I think that is because of how astrology is presented and conditioned in society. I mean, I know growing up I only would pay attention to that little like one paragraph in the back of a magazine that just says like Cancers cry all the time and Cancers are super emotional, and that's definitely one aspect. Like you were saying, there's different aspects of what comprises these signs, but I think the more I've learned about it through you, the more I've seen the benefit of learning about my entire chart as opposed to just my sun sign. So I'm curious if you can talk about why it's important to really look at your entire chart if you're trying to learn more about yourself via astrology.
I think so. Like Channing Nicholas, she does a great job when she does her.
Who's Channing Nicholas?
She's a renowned, amazing astrologist who's just very aware and incorporates the social issues of our day and time in her work. So when she gives a horoscope, she's just very attuned to justice, social justice, person justice. That's what I call it, and just. She taps into the essence and heart of each sign as she shares her interpretation of the horoscope for that week or month or whatever it is. Y'all should definitely check her out. But she tells you, don't just read your sun sign, read your rising sign. The rising sign is going to be more personal to you. Just read both from now on. Read your sun sign and find out your rising sign. There's all kinds of ways online, like astrological is a good way to just quickly find out the orientation of your chart. Of course, there's co-star. I'm not a huge fan. I find it to be too abstract, but
we'll get into
anyway,
that a little bit later.
So the point is, or where we were going is, you are more complex than just, let's say, your sun sign. You are not just a sun sign. So it's good to know the different aspects of you, just like you would normally. Like, no one's going to be like, oh, hi, Dashka, and that's it, and leave it like that.
Right.
What's your favorite color? No.
Right.
I want to know more about you. It's the same thing for your chart. So if you learn more about your Mercury, what's your Mercury in?
Leo.
Exactly. That tells me how you communicate.
Right.
And it also tells me, okay, this could be a trigger for her.
Right.
If I ignore her a certain way, or maybe she's not blossoming enough because she's not expressing herself in X, Y, and Z way. Your Venus, which tells you how you love to be loved.
Virgo.
Exactly. And what
Practical.
you appreciate. But it's not just practicality, health, well-being. Yeah. And you love, that's how you also love to share your love.
Right.
And there's also other minor planets, like asteroids we use too, Ceres. That's the mothering aspect too. But Jupiter, Pluto, Uranus, all of these different, everyone has them in different signs. Now, I have to say, the last 4 planets of our solar system, because they have such a large orbit, more people fit into them.
Right.
So it's generational. You and I are different. We're 3.5 years apart, so we don't have those planets the same, like Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. But your friends, you have the same.
Yeah, we do.
So, but how come? But I'm pretty sure we have, I think, Pluto in common. I might be lying. But all of us have a shared experience around, for example, 9/11. Millions of us.
Right.
And Pluto was in a certain degree when that happened, that affected our charts.
And our emotional interpretation of it all.
The trauma. It's not by accident.
Right.
Or the kids born today around COVID time, all their charts are going to have Saturn, Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus in the same way. We're together in certain things.
And I think it speaks largely to how the generations move differently and how they respond to things. Because
they say that. Every other generation gets along.
Yeah, better. Because if you look at this generation that's coming up, I think they're and this is why I always say that I think millennials really are the bridge, because we have an understanding of the generation that comes before us and how it's more about duty and obligation, and the generation that comes after us is more about the self and individualism and really the way they're reconstructing the way the world is moving forward. That's a shared aspect that whole generation has because of where, like you were saying, that constellation is aligned for them. So, and I think also what you were saying in terms of knowing your chart, when my sister said that, my Mercury is in Leo, I think, what I have found is I gravitate towards certain people because, for example, my best friend Alexis is a Leo. And so our communication is always really in harmony because I have an understanding of how she expresses herself because it's similar to my own. That being said, there are certain ways that she reacts to a situation that might differ because I'm a Cancer sun. So my emotionality might be different. My Venus is different, so I think it really helps you to really have a greater understanding of yourself and other people. And I think sometimes when people just focus on the sun sign, and they just say, I know people who are like, oh, I don't like Libras or I don't like Scorpios because they're this one way. It's really I think it's a disservice because there's so much more to people than one sign. So I think that really covers really why it's important to have a greater understanding of your entire chart. And it's actually also really a lot of fun when you sit down and especially as an adult, I have found, because it helped me to really grasp why, even when I met other people who were born in July like me, how there were certain things I gravitated towards, but there were other things that I didn't. And I think it also helped me to understand why my sister and I were really polar opposites in a lot of ways with how we emotionally respond to things. I think this is actually a really cool thing for parents to learn about as well, because I think sometimes you do the best with what you know, and I think sometimes parents raise their children all the same way, But if you have a greater understanding of what the needs are of your child based on who they are, their core, their essence, I think it helps shape them differently and helps you support them in the ways that are best for them individually. So I really think astrology provides insight and more compassion and understanding for the people around you, including the people around you who you may not get along with, or the people around you who you just literally don't vibe with. I feel like that's the thing people say, I don't vibe with. But that gives you an understanding not only as to why, but also helps you to navigate it differently. Okay, this person might be triggered by this. Okay, this person gets upset when I say this. I don't get it, because I don't see why that would make someone upset, but maybe I can understand why that aspect impacts this person this way, or what that's attributed to, or what's the root of where that comes from. So I really do think it allows space for more compassion and understanding. That being said, I do want to be mindful of time because I feel like we could go in circles. I think something that people most commonly hear, and actually, as we're recording this is coming out on Friday, but we just entered a new moon in Taurus. Yes. And I think a lot of people, you share that with me all the time, like the new moon is in this sign, or we're in a Mercury retrograde. What does that mean when we say there's a new moon, or when we say we're a Mercury retrograde? Let's start with the new moon. What does it mean when there's a new moon?
So if you're talking science or astronomy, what it means is that the sun and the moon are right on top of each other.
Okay.
They're closest. It's called conjunct in astrology, but they're close together. They're the same degree. So like yesterday at 3 p.m. Eastern time, the moon was in 21 degrees Taurus and the sun was in 21 degrees Taurus.
So when you say 21 degrees Taurus, how do you know it's in Taurus?
It's in the constellation of Taurus.
Okay.
In the sky.
In the sky. In that piece of the pie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like literally right now, the sun is in probably right now 22 degrees Taurus. It moves like a degree a day.
And what does that mean in terms of the impact it has on people? So what, it's in Taurus, what does that mean?
So that's the filter.
Okay.
So remember, yeah, and that's a good way to just bring it all together. The moon is the what? So
right.
The moon, we know, has to do with emotions. It has to do with the mothering aspect. It has to do with the ebb and flow of things. Basically, you just put it like your emotions, your memories, your past. The how does it express itself is the sign of Taurus.
Okay, so let's say that again, so we can clean it up. So the what is the moon?
Yeah.
The what is the moon? That's your emotional expressions, your past, your mothering, and then you said the how. The how is
how are these emotions and feelings and all that stuff, this essence, this energy expressed, is through the lens, through the characteristics of Taurus, which has to do with the senses. So it's very sensual. It's very in the moment. It has to do with your inner resources, your values. So this is what this new moon is about. Mm-hmm. And then, guess what? On a deeper level, if you know what your chart is, the where is the house.
Okay.
So for me, it's all of this stuff that was happening yesterday, well, for the next 2 weeks probably, is happening in my 6th house of the health and well-being and day-to-day activities.
Because that's where your Taurus is.
That's where my Taurus, yes, when I was born, the constellation of Taurus was in the 6th house.
Got
for
it.
You, I don't remember.
I don't remember either where my Taurus is.
I
but
know,
that house,
your 12th house?
But that's the house that is impacted for you individually.
Yes, individually. But
okay.
For everyone, this new moon is affecting everyone.
Right, but it affects you differently depending on where your Taurus is placed in your house.
Exactly. So
got it.
Yeah. I mean, this energy to me has been great.
Yeah.
And helping you know it can if you want. If you don't resist.
Right.
There's a lot of resistance. You see, there can be resistance.
Right.
Even if you don't know about astrology, but there's stuff happening in everyone's life, and it could be easy or it could be hard.
Well, something I was reading about this new moon is that it's a time to look at the decisions you've made the decisions you've made that have been based in fear and deciding to operate differently and to trust in the seeds that you've been planting and that they are blooming. And I think when I think of the Tauruses that I know, I think they are very stable people, but because they really appreciate stability, it is scary. Change can feel scary, or it can feel shaky.
Or it has to be the speed that they want.
Right.
And so when it happens or things are happening, they feel like at them, they get freaked out or scared.
Right.
But how many of us is that true too?
Right.
You know, who are not Tauruses. So, but the beauty, and so the purpose of the new moon, every month we have it, once a month. Every 2 weeks, yeah. So we had the new moon, so in 2 weeks we're gonna have the full moon. The new moon is usually, it's new beginnings. That's what it's about.
Okay.
So it's a good time. That's why I was writing yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I write down my intentions, my affirmations, and all the things that I would love to come to be, so that in 2 weeks' time, when it's the full moon has to do with fruition.
Okay.
The endings of things, but also in a way beginnings.
So a new moon is not a full moon.
No, new moon is actually in the sky. You don't see it.
Okay. So, and then the next thing was Mercury retrograde. I think people will say like, oh my gosh, technology's not working. There's a lot of miscommunication. Right. Oh, Mercury must be in retrograde. But what does that really mean? But we've said earlier, Mercury is the house of communication.
It's the planet of communication. Okay. Right. It's associated with the third house.
Okay.
So, I think everyone should know, all planets have a retrograde period. All of them. Some of them every few years. Every one of them. So, it's just less common to hear about. But Venus is retrograde, Saturn turns retrograde, Neptune turns retrograde. I think Pluto's retrograde now. We just don't hear about it as much as Mercury.
Okay.
But, number 2, what it means is that it's going backwards. But literally it's not. It's just from our perspective on Earth that the planet looks like it's going backwards.
Okay.
You know, that's just how it looks like from us. Just like the sun looks like it is, like for us, like where we are on Earth, like it looks like it goes across the sky, but really it's just stationary.
It's stationary.
So
it's the way we're moving.
Exactly. But nonetheless, there's still an influence energetically. So when it happens for 3.5 weeks when Mercury is retrograde, there is a slowing down of communication. It depends what sign it's in too. We got to remember that.
Okay.
Mercury retrograde in the sign of Gemini is going to be different than that in Taurus.
Okay.
Than that in Capricorn. But regardless, usually stuff is going up, with your text messages, and there's miscommunications, all kinds of stuff like that. So it's not a good time to sign contracts. Right. It's not a good time to buy new electronics. Or else you might have to return it if you don't mind doing that. But
so how do you stay aware of those things without feeling like it's dictating every aspect of your life?
Sometimes I wonder what kind of astrologer I am, because sometimes I'm finding out 2-3 days later something major happened, because I'm just like, but it's COVID times too. I'm just like, this 2021 and 2020 is just woo. But what I do, I just get I get a nice calendar.
Okay.
And the calendar, an astrology calendar, and it tells you what these aspects are. And like I said, it's a language. So every normal calendar usually says a new moon, full moon. Mm-hmm. The difference is they don't tell you the sign. I think it's important to know what sign it is. And also if it's a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse. By the way, y'all, we are in eclipse season officially.
What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean, though?
What it means is we're in a wormhole.
Oh my gosh! Please, sis, you gotta break that down, though.
A lot of new surprises and stuff are about to happen.
Okay.
We are in it because in 2 weeks we're gonna be the lunar eclipse.
Okay.
Yippee-yay.
Yippee-yay.
So who knows what's gonna happen? I don't know. I can't predict that for you, but
So you started talking, and that was actually my next question, because you started talking about you have a calendar, you have an astrological calendar. Yeah. So how do you think people can incorporate astrology into their lives in a balanced way outside of a calendar? Like, what do you do personally so that you continue to have that awareness, but it doesn't feel overwhelming? Because sometimes people they're really looking at their horoscope every day and using that to predict what their day looks like, or if they can talk to someone. And I think sometimes that defeats the purpose of what astrology should be like.
That behavior, and I used to be like that, at least for me, came from a place of fear and not trusting myself. I am a child of, I believe, the universe. Mm-hmm. I am part of it. I belong here. So it's a tool. It's not me.
Okay.
So I definitely visit or read horoscopes from people I trust, like Naika. Great sites that I trust, that I can read. Okay, this is what's happening for the week. The elements, the essence, the energies. Mm-hmm. But I forget. I read it. I keep it in some corner in my mind. But then I move on with my life. But I am aware. Today feels funky.
Right.
And people are a little on edge, and that usually takes me off to check my calendar, to be honest. Or if I feel off and I look at my calendar, I'm like,
Yeah. It
You know,
provides an
Jupiter is
explanation.
square Saturn. I'm making this up, you know, and then I'm like, it's like an explanation, but it also just gives me a heads up.
Right.
It's kind of like if someone tells you, okay, this medication is going to help you feel better in the long run, but here are the side effects, or here's what could happen if you take it for good or for worse. So you're aware.
Right.
It doesn't mean that it's dictating that or making it so.
Right.
It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it could.
Right.
And so it just gives me a heads up. But I just have my planner, I have my calendar, and I have my websites I go to. But I also just trust my gut. Like, sometimes I just feel off. Sometimes I also feel very elated.
Yeah.
And I'm like, something is up today.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, Jupiter is trying Neptune. Oh my God, I'm going to dabble into my creativity.
Right.
It's a great day to do that.
I think something, now that you said that too, something I do, I like to look I go through my day and I exist because I also feel like if something's written in the stars already, me being aware of it isn't going to necessarily, I can't change certain things, how they're going to flow, like how someone's going to react or how someone's feeling that day or the miscommunication that's going to happen. I think, like you were saying, it's a tool. It allows me to navigate through a situation differently emotionally. I may not take things as personally if I know that we're in the middle of a retrograde, because I know miscommunications are going to happen. So it's easier for me to step back and be like, okay, I'm not going to take that personally, or I'm not going to beat myself up when this mistake happened with this technology or this email didn't go through. I'm like, you know what? Mercury girl, you coming for me, but that's okay. I'm gonna like give it a rest for this moment. So I think it actually helps me to cut myself some slack in certain circumstances.
Yes, and I mean, like, I think I'm weary of using the terms written in the stars because we make what we want of it.
It is up for interpretation.
So, but also expression. So every other week we also have the quarter moons. These are usually the rougher patches. Every other week, but these are also instruments of change.
Right.
So after I planted my seeds yesterday or this week, whatever, next week is going to be maybe a little rough patch as I implement them, as I practice.
As they bloom.
But to help me to adjust
my
course so that when the full moon comes, okay, boom.
And it's happening organically.
It
like,
is.
even if you're not keeping track of this, it's
you are it.
Yeah, we're
But
constantly
now,
evolving.
Some people were not okay yesterday around this time because they are shedding things so that they can plant those seeds.
Right.
Or some people are resisting because they resist. I don't know. I mean,
so, you know, we talked a little bit, and y'all, as always, these conversations are always roller coasters, so I hope you're keeping up. So we talked a little bit about how you've incorporated into your life, and you also, you mentioned some people that you follow. Is there a particular site or book that you have or you use? I also can share these, on Instagram. I can share a list if there's anything. Maybe that would be easier to do. Because I think it might be hard to think of them all on top of your head. Chani Nicholas was the main one.
She's a great, Spirit Daughter is fun.
Okay.
Like, on Instagram to follow her.
I love Spirit Daughter.
She has great posts that simplify what's happening for every season, like Taurus and every month. Stephen Forrest is a great resource for reading. I think The Inner Sky, that's the name of the book I read when I was in my astrology class. Great book for beginners.
Okay. The Inner Sky.
The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest. Chani Nicholas is a good person to follow. Her website and the app is amazing.
I really like Hood Witch.
Hood Witch is fun. Pam Hugans, you will have to write down her name.
Yeah.
But she is awesome too.
I also really like Sanctuary Worlds. They basically just simplify each of the signs and like if they're fixed, mutable,
and that's
what elements are associated with it, but they do it in a way that's digestible, so I really appreciate that. We're gonna talk about social media apps in a moment. I think CoStar, I have mixed feelings about it, but I do like their Instagram because I think they have a really fun way of just showing how the signs react in different circumstances. Sis took her wig off, y'all. She's hot. But I love how they also, in their caption, they'll say, like, check your rising sign or check your Venus. Like, they really allow you to become more informed about your own chart. So I do appreciate that about CoStar. So that being said, though, I did want to touch a little bit on how you feel about astrology becoming prominent in pop culture, such as the CoStar app. You mentioned before that you think it's too abstract. What do you mean by that?
I just feel like for people who are not aware of the different nuances of astrology, it's even for me when I look at it, I'm like, well, where's the first? I don't know. I just there's no, they don't. It just doesn't seem clear enough for me in terms of describing the different ways the planets relate to each other and stuff like that. Like I prefer Time Passages, that app.
Okay, so before we even jump into what Time Passages is, I don't know how many people who are listening are aware of what CoStar is, but CoStar it's an app, but it's an astrology app that basically you plug in the time you were born, all the information you would need to have your chart, and they list out what your chart is, but they also describe what each of those planets are, their houses, all the different things we were talking about. I actually found it, I have some understanding of astrology, so maybe that's why I didn't find it as confusing. I do think it makes it pretty distinctive. That being said, I do think because CoStar has become more popular over time, it's becoming a little more commercialized. So what I mean by that is they would give you like a message every day that was related to you and specific to your chart. Something that could either be encouraging or sometimes illuminating, tell you a little bit about yourself. Sometimes CoStar be dragging you, honestly. But I have found that it's become fluffier. Like now it's just like fluff. It's just...
And it's a beautiful presentation, like the way it looks.
Right.
I'm just like, this is to me not the essence of astrology.
Okay. So you were saying Time Passages.
Time Passages I like better.
And what is Time Passages?
It's just another it's an astrology app, but it shows you your chart, which I don't know if CoStar
They show you your chart, but
in
not
a pie form.
In a
they don't.
Not in a pie form.
Exactly. They do it in more like a...
It's like a
chart.
Yeah, like an Excel chart almost.
Exactly. And so you see it, but they also describe each of the different aspects, but in a deeper psychological, philosophical way.
Okay. Which also, y'all, I just want to say, depending on how you receive information, how you download information, one might be better for you. So, for example, what my sister's describing, the pie chart, for me, that feels, the philosophical aspect feels a little too abstract, personally. I like the way CoStar is set up, where it's more structured as this sort of Excel chart and the way it breaks down. So you really do have to find what works best for you, but I think it's also important to not take these things, like we were saying, these are expressions, interpretations. Don't take these things as fact and then don't allow yourself to evolve on the life that you're living. Like, still be present where you are. I think sometimes people look at their CoStar app every day and that's dictating which friend they're talking to or how they're communicating with someone. Like, it's a tool. So I think that's important to consider, even when you're looking at, those zodiac memes online. There's this one Instagram I follow called Glossy Zodiac, and it's really funny because they'll take like Bratz dolls or Barbies and they'll like, do different memes about like how the different signs react, or the Cancer starter pack. And sometimes I think those things water us down and they simplify us to stereotypes. For example, I'm just going to use the Cancer one. It's always like crybaby, holds grudges, is a ride or die, sensitive, and those things are true. But I always like to say to people, I was raised by a mother who's a Virgo, or Virgo Leo cusp, I guess we would say. And I think that's given me a different sort of backbone. And
but also your moon is in Virgo.
Right.
So you're gonna be I have another friend, her rising is Capricorn.
Right.
She's a Cancer. Hell no. Does she's still sensitive. Of course she is sensitive.
Right.
She's not gonna let you see it.
Correct. I don't like, I'm not the person who cries in front of everyone.
And over time learning how to trust yourself more and more and more, just like you are, so people don't walk over you and take advantage of your kindness.
Right. And also trusting that it's okay to sometimes showcase that vulnerability. So it's interesting because sometimes I relate to those memes and a lot of times I don't. So I don't think you should pigeonhole yourself based on what is presented to you in pop culture. I really think it's really, the more you inform yourself, the more you learn about something, the better understanding you will have. So we've dabbed into a lot of different things. What do you think are the benefits of someone incorporating astrology into their life? And you can take your time.
Okay, yeah. I think some of the benefits are you get to know yourself better in a different way through a different language, and it's a lot of fun. You get to know other people differently and better, but also you get to explore outside of your norm, outside of your little world, which is a beautiful world, but that you're interconnected with something way beyond you. And I know that can seem scary for some, but it's true. You know, we don't live in just our bubbles or within our family circles or friend circles, work circles. You're literally part of a global network, but also a universal network. And it just helps, I think, to help us remember that, to recognize that, and to connect with that. Um, yeah, I think, but also it helps you navigate life.
Hmm.
It helps you, I mean, there's so many different tools out there. And for me, this is such a great, it's just something I identify with, I connect with, that helps me navigate through life, because especially now, it's a hell of a roller coaster. At times, it's very painful and excruciating and confusing.
Hmm.
And when I can help understand what's happening around me and within me through the lens of astrology, through the stars, intuition, for me, it just helps makes a lot more sense of things and helps me be calm, or at least at the very least more objective, and that, you know what, I'm human, which means I'm super and powerful and I'm part of something awesome and great. I can get through this.
And made of stardust, literally.
Seriously. So somehow, some way, I'm gonna get through this.
And I say that all the time, and I think it is a sweet thing to say to someone that you're made of stardust, but I actually mean it literally. We, like you say, I think you said it to me one time, we are of the universe, and I think it's really important to remember that when, I think especially in moments where you feel like you don't belong, or you feel like you're outside of the fray, like, there's something, you were placed on this planet in a very specific way, and you are integral to the intersectionalities of it all, the mapping of it all. You're not accidental. You are part of the universe. You were created to fit into the universe in a very specific way, and to learn certain lessons, to share certain lessons, like all of it. It really all overlaps in ways we don't understand, and I do think astrology is just one way to gain a greater understanding of that as you're just trying to learn and grow. So we're rounding up on our hour, and I have one last question for you, because I think this is the most common question that people ask. It's the most common question that is part of pop culture. I think it's how a lot of people, even people who do not care about astrology, people who say they don't care about astrology, they always know their sign. And always, I think it's become like a running joke, you know, for people to say, like, you know, the first question I ask on a date, or the first question on a dating app is, what's your sign? So my question to you is that a good question, or is there a better question we can ask a person?
I think if you're gonna ask it from a place of objectivity, neutrality. Because like I always tell my friends, I knew you were gonna head to this question. I knew it. You didn't even read it.
Listen, that's the real tea.
I always tell my friends, and I tell myself, every sign can get along with every sign. It's just some might get along better than others. And you gotta take into consideration someone. So they always say in relationships, it's not just your sun sign, because that's what we focus on.
Right.
It's not. Is your moon sign compatible? Your rising sign compatible? And what's your Venus?
Your love sign.
But especially Mercury and Moon. If these are compatible, even if your sun technically isn't, or, you know, may be a little rough, and by that, I won't get too technical, if it's a square or opposing, whatever, you might be able to be okay and make it work.
What about if your Mercury isn't compatible, but your sun is?
But then I would go deeper. What's the moon like? Can you understand each other on an emotional level?
Okay.
Is your rising, like, are there other things in the chart that complement one another? Because even if your Mercury, maybe your communication might be a little bit more difficult, which is important. That's what. So everyone's different too. For me, I don't think I could handle that.
Okay.
I've done it before. I think communication is so important if it's compatible, but there could be other things in the chart that compensate so that maybe the way you communicate, you're teaching one another or you complement each other.
I see.
It might be different,
Right.
but maybe there's other things in your chart, like your sun sign, that make it easy.
Right.
That's not really jarring.
Right.
But if there's other things in your chart, like your sun, that's already like, oh, a little rough, a little
Yeah.
difficult, and then now your Mercury.
And you can learn. I think I
Yeah,
and
you can, yeah.
I say this all the time. Like, I'm just going to use our sun signs as examples. My sister and I, technically, from what I've learned and understood, Aquarius and Cancers are very different, and they are not really compatible per se. But I think my sister and I think that was my first, I guess, example of a relationship, of learning how to understand someone. And I think my sister and I have a really beautiful relationship, even though we respond emotionally to things differently, we communicate differently, we interpret things differently, we care about different things. But I think because we respect who we are, we understand who we are, I think that also allows our communication to flow a lot differently, a lot more harmoniously.
Oh, look at our charts.
Right.
Your rising sign's in an air sign. I'm an air sign.
Right.
I'm pretty sure I think your Saturn's in Aquarius.
Yeah.
I'm in Aquarius.
Yeah.
There's other planets of yours that are in Aquarius. And then, I mean, there's...
So the real
Yeah.
tea is, you can ask what's your sign,
But there's more.
but that's just the tip of the iceberg.
That's just the tip. And it's just for fun. Like if... Yeah. I'm being more open. Like
Yeah.
if someone says, I used to run away, no offense, Scorpios, I used to run away.
Right.
Because I was like, it's a lot of intensity, a lot of depth. But now if I were to meet someone that said, yeah, I'm a Scorpio, of course I know what I know. So I'd be like, what kind? When are you born? Blah, blah,
Right.
blah. But then I'd be like, let me get to know you.
Right. Right.
I don't know you just because you tell me your birthday is October 29th. What does that mean?
Right.
Who are you?
Yeah.
And also every sign has a different, like, the positives and negatives, right?
Yeah.
But where are you on your journey?
Yeah.
How dare I dismiss you because of your sign, but I don't know how you're expressing that sign.
That's so real.
Every sign can be expressed in the most golden, beautiful way and can teach you something you never knew you could learn.
So I think that's a beautiful way to close out the conversation. So I think I would say there's nothing wrong with asking what's your sign, but just know that there's so much more to that question.
Yeah, and the answer.
And that's it. We did it! Thank you for joining me, Naika. Before we close out, I want people to be able to learn more about you and the work that you're doing. Not, my sister, obviously, astrology is just one of her passions, but there's so many more things she's working on. She introduced herself in the beginning. Is there a place that people can follow you eventually, or social media, or anything that you can share with folks?
Yeah, I'm still working on my website and IG handle for my business. It will be at the Medicine Woman Project, but for now you can follow me at A Mystic's Journey.
Perfect. And so once that website is up and that handle is up, I'll be sure to share it on the Instagram podcast as well. But thank you everyone for listening. I hope this was informative for y'all. As always, these conversations are just the introduction. They're just the start. This is just the first season. But, maybe Naika will be back. Maybe we'll have another person on to talk about astrology. If y'all have questions, please DM me. Please send them to justadashpodcast@gmail.com. But I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. And everyone, please give it up for my sister. Woo! Just a dash. Thanks, everyone.
Just a dash.
All right, y'all. We are here. We have made it to yet the end of another episode. I am so happy if you've made it to this point, because that means that you got to listen to a really cool conversation. I really love talking to my sister about astrology and just kind of picking her brain. We really are such polar opposites. I think when people meet us, they're surprised at how well we get along. But I really have to say it is due in part to really exploring each other's personalities through a tool like astrology, and really having an understanding of one another, our motivations, whether that's emotionally, whether that's professionally, whether that's personally, how we look at relationships, how we look at conflict. Really, astrology has been something that's been a great subject for us to connect over, and it's really built a stronger bond between us as sisters and as people. So it's something that I really value in my life as a great tool to extend compassion more and more to the people around me, particularly the ones who I don't share the same experiences with or who I have trouble understanding because life experiences, privileges, whatever the case may be, has allowed us to have a different view of the world. So I hope that that little introduction to astrology piqued your interest, and make sure to check out the resources that Cook mentioned. I think, I would definitely want to have more conversations with people about it. Who knows what this will shape out into the second season. But we are at the end of another episode, and it is time for the rec room. So, given that we've been talking about all these different sensory things, connection, empathy, understanding people better, it only felt right that I share three recommendations that do just that, in different forms of content. So I have a show for you, I have a film for you, and I have a podcast for you. And I'm going to start with the show. So this is actually my favorite show of all time that I've watched on Netflix. It's actually I would say it's probably my favorite show of all time in general. And I actually mentioned it when I was talking about Firefly, and that would be Sense8. So, if y'all remember, I talked about how there was another show on Netflix that had gotten canceled and they made a film about it. I was talking about Sense8. So, Sense8 is my favorite show of all time. It's an American science fiction drama. It was created by the Wachowskis. And if anybody is familiar with the Wachowskis, they created the Matrix series, which I don't really think I need to go into that except saying that The Matrix is an iconic film, iconic film series. I think arguably one of the best of all time. And of course, we know as well that the Wachowskis are both trans, and I think that has really shaped their storytelling in a very unique and compassionate and just intriguing way. So the story of Sense8 basically begins when the psychic connection of eight strangers of a variety of walks of life from different parts of the world, they're birthed by a woman called Angelica, and she ends up killing herself to avoid being captured by this man called Whispers. These eight people basically now form a cluster of sensates. So sense eight with the number in the title is a play off those words because there's eight people. But they are essentially human beings who are mentally and emotionally linked and can sense and communicate with one another. And they share their knowledge, language, skills. So, what I really love about this show is that it was really ahead of its time. It was created in 2015 by the Wachowskis and also their frequent collaborator, and I might say his name wrong, Michael Straczynski. Y'all, some of these names, I gotta learn them for real, for real. But they created this show because they felt that so many themes were not being addressed on television. And those themes were identity, sexuality, gender, and politics. And they wanted to address it through the idea of empathy across all differences. And it won so many awards. But I think what I love about this show so much is that the way they explore these themes, it is so vivid. It is so beautiful and colorful. They actually filmed on location around the world because each of the characters comes from a different continent. And the way that they show how global we are, but how interconnected we are through the different storylines, through the conflicts, through love, through irrational behaviors, through issues that we all face, through language barriers, through family. It is just absolutely beautiful and mind blowing. Every episode is mind blowing and really allows you to step back and ask yourself, how are you moving through the world? How are you interacting with the human being next to you, beside you, who's different from you, who's just like you, who you're related to, who you're not related to? It really is a mind fuck in the best sort of ways. So it's just a show that I think was so ahead of its time, and basically it ended up being canceled. So I'm going to walk you through why it was canceled. So the second season actually began with a 2-hour special in 2017, but then the following month Netflix announced that they canceled the series and they left it with a cliffhanger. And many people were expecting a third season, which was under negotiation, but they canceled it because the reality was, even though there was a really great niche audience and people really loved it, it wasn't enough to support the production costs, which were really high. So to give you a number, it was 4.5 million per episode for the first season. The second season was 9 million per episode. And that's because they were filming on actual location. They were in Africa, Asia. They would go to Iceland Iceland, Kenya, all these different places, Korea, which is where each of the characters are from, Chicago. So they were all around the world. It's a very global show. And so it was too expensive to produce. So it's not that I don't understand from a marketing perspective, but naturally, the fans were entirely upset about it, myself included. And there was an online petition, hashtag renew sense 8, and all these other hashtags to bring back the show. And what ended up happening was they created a 2-hour special in 2018 that basically wrapped up the entirety of what the show would have been in the third season. But even to this day, there's constantly chatter for a third season. You have different characters, different actors who played characters on the show, excuse me, basically saying that they would come back and they would absolutely do a third season. And there's always a possibility of another revival. So it's really just an inspiring show. I actually started rewatching it while I was home because it's one of those shows that if you watch it again, you'll find more details and you'll find more intricacies in the story that's being created. But it's so much more relatable and identifiable than someone might imagine, even though this is about, psychic connections. You really have an understanding of what it is to feel human. It really makes you feel human when you watch this show, and I think there's something really beautiful and necessary about that. So I really love Sense8, y'all. I will hype it up any day. I don't want to give too much away because I am the sort of person, personally, if someone tells me about a show or tells me the plot or a storyline, I still like to watch a show. I still like to watch a film because my interpretation of what I'm watching may be different from another person, right? Like, I'm not going to take someone's word for it. I never take critics' words for it when they say something's bad. I want to determine that for myself. I have my own mind. So I would tell you everything that the show is about. I will tell you that there are 8 different characters and that they are all from different continents. They all have different walks of life. One of them is a DJ, one of them is a cop, one of them is an actor who is closeted, one of them is a Korean woman who works in a successful business with her father and brother, but who is constantly neglected by them. One of them is a trans woman who has a beautiful partner. And you just kind of navigate through their different storylines and you see how they connect and how they look out for each other, how they become a family, and how they're fighting against this organization called BPO, which is basically, it's called the Biological Preservation Organization, and they are hunting them down. And there's a reason why they're hunting them down. They want to use them. Why? I'm going to let y'all figure that out. Please watch this show, y'all. It is so, so good and is so exciting, and it really is just a good escape. I know that a lot of shows right now are really talking about the current state of the world, whether it's social justice or COVID. And, that's fine. I think sometimes we look to television, we look to movies to reflect, to act as a mirror of what's happening in the world. But sometimes it's also a way to escape. Actually, I will give this little teaser from the show because it's one of my favorite scenes. One of the characters, his name is Capheus, and he lives in Kenya. He is visited by one of the people who are in his cluster, and her name is Kala, and she's from India. And she's sitting in his hut in Kenya, and he's watching Van Damme, which is like this martial arts fighter who he's obsessed with. And she asks him, she says, I see places like this all the time, places that are, under-resourced or where people would be considered impoverished, and they don't have a bed, but they have a TV. What's up with that? What is the logic of that? And he said, that's easy. The bed keeps you in the slum. The TV takes you out of it. And I love that line because I think that is a universal feeling when people are watching shows, when people are watching movies. It extends your imagination beyond what you could think of. It makes you feel braver, smarter, like things are more possible. I'm the sort of person, I watch movies and I leave feeling like I'm a superhero. Like when I'm watching X-Men or if I'm watching Avengers, I start thinking I have powers. So, I really love Sense8 because I think it takes your mind to the next level. It allows you to imagine what it means to evolve, to become human, to have compassion, to have empathy, to see beyond the structures that we've created, the conditionings that we've created for our minds and for the minds of other people. So I've gone on enough, but y'all, I am really a fan of this show. It is truly it just blows my mind every time I watch it. I never get tired of rewatching it. I never get tired of the romance. I get never get tired of the conflicts. And I will say it is definitely a little violent. So if violence is not your thing, that's something to prepare for. I told my sister it's about, I would say in each episode, depending on the characters as well, there are about, I would say 30%, 30 to 40% violence. And it's usually, definitely graphic in that moment. But the story is just super, super intriguing. And the sex scenes, y'all, are fire because if y'all are emotionally and consciously linked to someone else, that means you get to share those sexual experiences. It's just visually beautiful. It just really captures the eye aesthetically. It's just a fantastic show. I could go on and on about it, really, but I think it's worth checking out. So, Sense8 is my first recommendation to y'all. It is available on Netflix, all the seasons, as well as the movie, which wraps up the entire show since they didn't have a season three. So moving on, the next film that I want to suggest, this is actually a film that I watched with one of my best friends, Sarah, and it's a cute little movie. It's called Timer. It's nothing that's going to blow your mind, but I think it's really cute because I remember watching a Black Mirror episode where it kind of had the same premise of basically there being a timetable of when you would find your soulmate. And I remember watching that episode and being like, wait, this was done already. This was done in a movie that I watched. It's a 2009 science fiction romantic comedy film, and it was written by Jack Schaefer. The plot concerns a device that counts down the moment in which you'll meet your soulmate. And it's centered around this character. Her name is Una, and she's a Los Angeles orthodontist, and she has a blank timer. So, what that means is her soulmate has not purchased one yet. So, if your soulmate doesn't have a timer, you can't see when the timeline is going to happen, of course. So, she's searching for her soulmate, and she basically brings her latest timerless boyfriend to get a timer. It doesn't match, and they end up parting ways. Conversely, her stepsister and her roommate Steph has a timer that indicates that she won't meet her soulmate for 15 years. So her lifestyle includes having one night stands with men whose timers are about to expire. She's like, okay, you're about to link up with your soulmate, but I'm going to get what I can get before then because I got plenty of time till I meet mine. And she basically tries to encourage Una to do the same. So it's really about the different ways they walk through those experiences of knowing when you're going to meet your soulmate or deciding not to because you don't have to. And what I really like about this movie is it's definitely a little predictable. I'm not going to say it's going to blow your mind or that you're not going to figure out the plot twist, but I like the premise, the question of if you could know when you would meet your soulmate, would you? If you could have, wow, that moment right there just reminded me of the that movie Brave, where she's like, if you could change your fate, would ya? But I love this film because it does tie into that question. Like if you could have that awareness of when those things were going to occur in your life, when you were going to meet the love of your life, when you were going to have success, when you are going to have a child, when you're going to make that first million, when your podcast is going to blow up, would you want to know that information? Would you want to know how would that change how you would walk through life, what relationships you would have, what experiences you would have? And I appreciate that because when I think about it, personally speaking, I don't want to know that information. I feel like part of the journey is finding that person. It's going through those lessons, through those ups and downs, through those roller coasters, through those peaks and valleys, because it just makes you have so much more gratitude for what you receive in the end, especially if you keep in mind, if you remember that something greater is lying ahead. You can't let go of that. I think hope is a big piece of that. You have to know, you have to truly believe, even when you're in the valley, that something higher, something greater is ahead for you, And that's difficult. That's a difficult thought to, maintain as you're going through sometimes what can feel like a monotonous or difficult period in your life. So I like films like that because they do it in a way that's lighthearted, that's funny, that really makes you sit back and think, huh, if I were in that position, if I had a timer on my wrist, how would I move? What would I say? What would I do? How would I interact with someone? Would I hit on that guy on the bar? Would I hit on that woman at the bar? Would I tell them the tea? What's really up? Would I be like Steph and be having one night stands? What would I do? What would you do? So I really love Timer. I think it's a cute little film. Once again, it's a fun little cute film and it's enjoyable. So check it out. Like I said before, it came out in 2009. I think you can probably find it on Amazon Prime. I'm sure it's somewhere maybe on Hulu. I haven't really looked for it in a while, but it was a cute little film that I enjoyed and it popped into my head. And the very last recommendation I have for y'all is actually my favorite podcast of all time. So I think, I don't remember who asked me this question, but a couple of weeks ago, somebody asked me how I got into podcasting and how I came across podcasting. I actually had a friend, his name is Jeremy, and I think he did like a podcasting I think he had a podcast, and I think he also invited me to like a podcasting convention that was happening. And I feel like I stopped by, and it definitely piqued my interest a little bit because I like the idea of listening to stories, of hearing people talk about their experiences. I think that's sometimes the easiest way to digest information. And I really always loved audiobooks, because when I was working, when I'm, doing all my event stuff, my event details, getting things done, sometimes music can be distracting for me because if I know the words, I'm going to sing along, y'all. Take me to karaoke, I'm going to have a good time, but I can do it by myself too. So I wanted something that I could listen to that allowed me to stay focused, and podcast became that tool for me. So I came across this podcast called S Town. And this podcast show blew my mind. So basically, in 2012, this horologist, his name is John B. McLemore, he sent an email to the staff of this show, This American Life, which I think everyone is familiar with This American Life, which is hosted by Serial Podcast. And he asked them to come investigate an alleged murder that happened in his hometown of Woodstock, Alabama, a place he claims to despise. And this is based on a real story, y'all. So, after a year of exchanging emails and several months of conversations, the producer Brian Reed traveled to Woodstock to investigate it. And he investigated the crime and he eventually found there was no such murder. But he struck up a friendship with this man. And this man he was depressed, but he was also so colorful and had such a vibrant mind. This person definitely is a savant of some sort. And he basically recorded his conversations with this man and the people of Woodstock. And it became this podcast called S Town. So I don't want to spoil it, but it ends up being spoiled anyway. John McLemore, he ends up killing himself by drinking potassium cyanide, which he did in 2015 while the podcast was still in production. And in the narrative of the podcast, you learn about this at the end of the second episode. But then you begin to see that this story is bigger than what John had emailed about. And the story is more about him and his life and what it's like living in this place called S Town. So it's called S Town, which is actually a pseudonym for Shit Town, which is what John calls this place. It's a derogatory term. And the show itself got a lot of mixed reviews. And before I even jump into that, let me just say I said earlier that John B. McLemore was a horologist. A horologist is a person who studies time. And that is significant to the show because it was so significant to him how he was spending his time and how he was stuck in a place he didn't want to be in, how he was stuck in a town that had backwards ideologies, that had backwards way of looking at race, of looking at gender, of looking at sexuality. So he was stuck in this place, but also yearning to change it. And I guess as someone who is from a place where that it's not as pronounced, I would say, being from South Florida, I wouldn't say that it's like a backwards, southern town like Woodstock, Alabama, but there was some relativity I could find in that. I think I'm a person who moved to New York because I just didn't feel like I belonged where I was. I knew there was something greater and something more to explore. Personally, that's me. I don't think that's for everybody, that was my own experience. And so that already drew me in, having that sort of relatability to it. But it had mixed reviews because it's really complex. You're talking about this white queer man, and that's important to the story as well, basically exploring his hometown and what he sees as a hindrance to development, to evolution in the human mind, in the human condition, in the human experience, right? But he also has a love for this town. And so they explore the conflict of that and how it shows up in his work, how it shows up in his relationships, how it shows up in decisions he makes, how it shows up in the grudges he has, how it shows up in his thinking of even reaching out and saying that a murder took place. And the murder has to do with a treasure in the town that he believes someone is after. after. So it really kind of has all these different sorts of twists and turns, but it's really exploring the story of this man's life. And definitely was mixed reviews. Some people found it voyeuristic. Some people felt like there was really no reconciliation at the end of the podcast of the story. Someone said, "Is S Town a freak show for the NPR crowd?" Many people found it to be provocative, but thought there was a lot of red herrings that didn't add up. What I will say in reading these reviews is that they were all written by white people. And the reason I'm saying that is because, as a person of color listening to this podcast, it was incredibly insightful and sometimes really ironic that I was, because it's a story about a white man, and it's a story about a town full of white people who really don't have any respect for people outside of their identity, but it's really because they were conditioned that way and their social constructs allow them to be that way. So I just found it so intriguing to really listen to how the root of that comes to be. You really get an insight as to how we condition people to think a certain way and behave a certain way and believe a certain thing. And to have this main character, John, really be opposed to that, but also be fighting the conditioning that he's so used to. He flip flops between saying the wrong thing, using slurs, and then beating himself up over it because he wants to be different. So I really think this show really explores what the evolution of becoming a better person looks like, or wanting to become a better person, what that looks like. And it's hard. I think, and this is something recently I heard from a friend, which is really true, we talk a lot about doing the work and evolving and letting go of the people that we used to be and wanting to become better versions of ourselves and learning about ourselves and extending forgiveness and compassion to ourselves and others. But there's also some loneliness that comes in that cycle, because a lot of times you have to mourn your past selves. You have to mourn the parts of yourself that you're letting go, the people you might be letting go, the ideologies, the mentalities. There's a pain that comes with that, because it might have been something you've always known and now you have to let it go. And there's some comfort you might find to that. Stepping into the unknown, trying to become a better person, trying to realign yourself with different ways of thinking, with different ways of moving forward. It's not just one, two, three easy. It takes work. And I think the podcast S Town really reflects that. I think the show Sense8 really reflects that. I think in some ways Timer really reflects that. And so I really just love content like that, because I find comfort in that and knowing that, hey, this is a shared experience, that when you're trying to become better, there's a lot of highs, but there's sometimes some lows in that, but you're going to make it through and you're going to figure it out. And even though he ended up killing himself, which is terrible, y'all. It really is a sad thing to hear in the podcast. You also see how much of an impact he had on so many people's lives around him. It also speaks largely to mental illness and how that impacts you. And so I think the show was just really eye-opening for me in terms of storytelling and capturing all aspects of storytelling and the lives of a person and what that looks like. So I really enjoyed it. It's really one of my favorite podcasts of all time, and it really captured my attention in terms of the world of podcasting. So I wanted to share that with y'all. So those are my three recommendations for this week. Definitely a little heavier than usual, but we're exploring, we're breaking into the mind and looking at all synapses and the ways it grows and expands and explores. And I'm glad y'all were with me for a very cool and very special episode, a different episode, but a fun one nonetheless. Of course, we'll be back to our regular schedule for the next episode, which, I'm always excited for everyone. But till then, y'all, take care of yourselves. We are constantly in the ebbs and flows of life, and sometimes that comes with really joyous, moments where we're elated, and sometimes it comes with bad news. Just know that you are strong, you are capable, and you are made of stardust, okay? And the world is a better place. Literally, the world is and can be and will be a better place because you are in it. Till next time, y'all. Catch you on the airwaves, sweet peas.